Traders, how are you? Marcello, founder of the Day Trading Academy. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. Overall for the week, the most kind of overarching story again was the situation with the coronavirus, which has now put China literally in a screeching halt, and that's going to start causing ripples throughout the entire world. It's already starting to affect a lot of the car companies, which stopped production. Now they're talking about there's going to be an escalation of remember that China is literally the manufacturing center for the whole world, right? So if they can't produce the parts for things that we need for all kinds of products, we're going to start seeing that now in the market. On Monday, S&P 500 and the NASDAQ hit record highs, mostly because of the workers in the factory slowly getting started after the Lunar New Year, which is the holiday that was extended due to the coronavirus. There's upbeat earnings information, positive economic data as well, and also there's a recent stimulus that China provided to not allow the economy and the markets to completely crash. Tuesday, slightly higher as well. S&P 500 and the NASDAQ hit their second consecutive record high. Chinese officials said the deadly coronavirus could be contained by April. And then on Wednesday, they hit the third consecutive record high, again, due to the news that the coronavirus might be peaking. Bullshit! Sorry, I got a little thing in my nose there. This lower on Thursday as China reports far higher infection and death rates. You see that? So on Wednesday, it might be peaking, but then on Thursday, there's more infections and death rates. See what I'm talking about? On stocks closed mixed on Friday after the renewed fears of the coronavirus and after also slowing U.S. consumer spending and weaker industrial production. Overall for the week, the indices in the U.S. are higher. The Dow went up 1.02%, the S&P 500 went up 1.58%, and the NASDAQ went up 2.21%. And remember, if you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments there with the hashtag AskMarcello. I'm thinking about doing a separate video about quarter four information, so let me know if you guys want to see that. And also don't forget to subscribe here to the channel on YouTube, or even if you're watching this on Instagram, remember that we have the podcast available as well. Spotify, iTunes, wherever it is, just look it up with Day Trading Academy is the name of the podcast. Other than that, in international markets, the European markets are mostly higher, with Italy being the biggest winner at 1.62%. The Latin American markets are mixed. The Mexican exchange went up by 1.35%. The Merval in Argentina went down 6.63%. And then Africa and Middle Eastern markets, South Africa was up 1.02%. Saudi Arabia negative 2.27%. And in Asia and the Far East, mostly mixed, with Taiwan being the biggest winner at 1.75%. And the biggest loser was the Philippines at 3.08%. We had a good run so far in Bitcoin. It finally topped 10,000 again, up over 40% in 2020 at its strongest level since September. Remember that the one-year high for Bitcoin is at about 13,797. And for the week, Bitcoin went up 5.40% at 10,340.90 cents. And financial and banking news, consumer inflation in China went up by 5.4%, much higher level than anticipated by analysts, and also higher as well than what they had for December. This is because of the higher food prices due to the Lunar Year holiday and the soaring pork prices. If you guys remember, they had another virus due to the pork, and they had to literally slaughter a bunch of pork and then start importing it, and that caused pork prices to soar. Without more volatile food and energy categories, the core inflation was up just about 1.5% during the month. One of the things I want to tell you guys is inflation isn't a good thing for us. It's a good thing for governments because the debt that they take on, for example, the United States, well, the whole world at this point, right? A developed world, I should say. It's cheaper for governments to pay back the loans that they borrow. So, for example, if the inflation is at 1% for the next 10 years, the debt that was taken out 10 years before is 10% cheaper. But for you and I, it's bad because everything goes up, right? So the inflation is literally what it goes up by. Most people don't realize, and this might be a fun fact for some of you, that the United States has had 3 central banks. Not 1, 3. The first 2 already failed. The third one is in the process of failing now, in my opinion. We'll see that in the next, within 10 years or so. But between these central banks, we had the gold standard, right? That's why the dollars that we use now, it's called fiat money. It's like monopoly money because it's literally not backed by anything. So keep that in mind. Other than that, Trump expected to release a $4.8 trillion federal budget for the fiscal year in 2020. It includes cuts to social programs and foreign aid, and it boosts the military spending by 0.3%. The Congressional Budget Office is forecasting that the deficit should go up by more than $1 trillion in the fiscal year for 2020, up from $585 billion in the fiscal year 2016. China's economy grew by China's economy grew by 6.1% in 2019, the weakest pace in near 3 decades, and now the coronavirus should definitely affect that number as well. And there's also concerns about the euro economy on Wednesday as the euro fell to its weakest level against the dollar since 2017. It dropped by as much as 0.4%, which is $1 and 0.08-ish cents, because there's 4 digits there in the cents, so it's right around there, 108. And Germany is now likely to get into a recession due to the coronavirus, due to the fact that they rely a lot on the export, specifically to China. In Mexico, the central bank decided to lower the rate by 25 basis points to 7% to be able to expect a cut to the cut that they did make expected to boost the economy despite the higher inflation. For commodities, crude oil in the U.S. went up 3.37%. International Brent went 5.23%. The IEA, which is the International Energy Agency, slashed its forecast for global demand this coming year in 2020, which is going to be down to the 2011 levels. The coronavirus obviously is affecting that because China is now the biggest importer of oil in the world, especially since now the U.S. is exporting oil. Other than that, precious metals for the week, gold is up 0.82%, silver up 0.28%. And in political news, Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, the leader of the German Chancellor Merkel's Christian Democrats, has decided to step down due to the fact of the let's say the sensitive political situation there in Germany. Remember, I always want to remind you guys, I'm never going to get political when I do these videos, so it doesn't matter if you're right, left, center, black, white, purple, doesn't matter. I just want to try to present the facts. What's actually happening there in Germany is that the AfD, which is more of the right party, they're not center right. They would say it's more, I don't want to say extreme, but it's more leaning more right than the center. They have been literally taking over the elections in Germany. There was one department, you can think of it like a state, that was always left leaning, and for the first time ever, the right actually won. And Merkel is refusing to do any negotiation with this party called the AfD. Well, they just happen to keep winning more and more elections. So this Annegret stepped down because she's saying she literally just doesn't want to do anything because Merkel is not wanting to negotiate with this party, and at the same time, they don't want to work with the party that's up and coming. Let's put it that way. Other than that, in economic news, Capital Economics estimates that the coronavirus could cost the global economy $280 billion, could send the world GDP in reverse quarter over quarter for the first time since 2009. And a lot of hope is that the other quarters, meaning the second, third, and fourth, which would be April on, we could have enough movement now that the coronavirus is gone to be able to go ahead and recover what we lost on the first quarter. The world GDP reaches a level that it would have achieved if there was no outbreak in the middle of 2021. The UK economy grew by 1.4% in 2009, even though it didn't grow at all in quarter 4 of 2019. I said 2009. It should be 2019. They grew bigger than both France and Germany. Germany grew at 0.6% and France grew at 1.2%. Remember, this is the last year now that the Brits are going to be in the European Union. One of the things that I find hysterical when I tell you guys about the news, I never watch the news due to the fact that I think it's mostly opinions of what they want you to believe, not the actual information. I'll give you a few examples. One was the election. Absolutely everybody said that Trump was going to lose. Trump won. Brexit is another example. Everybody said they were going to stay, and they left. And now the same thing with the British economy. Everybody was saying how horrible it was for the British to leave the EU. They're not going to do well, this, and that. And they grew the most by all the economies there in the Euro, or at least the biggest economies like France and Germany. Pretty funny, isn't it? Other than that, U.S. job openings dropped 364,000 to a 2-year low in December at 6,400,000. Hiring increased marginally, suggesting that the recent acceleration in job growth unlikely to be sustained. It's now the lowest reading since December 2017. And U.S. consumer spending further slowed in January, with sales at clothing stores declining by the most since 2009. It's raising a lot of concerns about the trend and the economy's ability to continue expanding at a moderate pace. I always remind you this. In most developed economies, the consumer spending is the majority, above 50% of the economy. Canada, the United States, most of Western Europe, England, Ireland, Australia, Chile. A lot of the economy in the US, for example, 70% is consumer spending. So when that slows down, it's a big hit to the economy. So remember that. This is why that piece of news is actually very important. Other than that, Germany was at zero growth in the quarter four 2019, driven part by the weakness in the manufacturing sector. Remember that they rely a lot on their exports, especially to China. And in corporate news, Lyft, the competition to Uber, reported their quarter four earnings. They lost $356 million, and their losses for 2019 were $2.6 billion. Now, the party's almost over, because the only reason why all these companies can continue to function is because there's all this easy money in the system. Once we go into a recession and there's not as much money in the system, a lot of these companies are going to go out of business. I'm not saying that Lyft is going to go out of business, but it's going to put a lot of these, the startup culture that has been rampant in the last 10 years or so, it's definitely going to change. Nissan shares fell to their lowest in 10 and a half years, plunging 9.6% after they said that they're going to cut the annual profit forecast. They're also not going to pay a dividend in the second half of 2020, and they posted the first quarterly loss in a decade. Now, Renault, which is the France automaker, has shares in Nissan, which is the Japanese automaker, and they're going to be affected as well, and they said that they're going to cut their dividend down as a result. In trade news, Germany's trade surplus with the U.S. is slightly down last year, unlikely to mollify President Trump. He stepped up the attacks on EU trade, and also the exports of German goods to the U.S. in 2019 hit an all-time high to $330 billion, up 4.7%. The U.S. trade deficit with Germany is down by $1.63 billion, helped by a surge in German imports. Technology, U.S. administration is seeking a big boost to NASA's budget to be able to fulfill a mission to put men and women on the moon in 2024. Congress is asking to allocate $25 billion in 2021, with $12.4 billion for the moon landing mission. And the NASA annual budget climb is gone from less than $20 billion in 2017, the year that Trump took office, to $22.6 billion for the fiscal year 2020. By 2025, they want it to be $26.3 billion. And the social media giant Facebook says it suspended a network of accounts from Russia military intelligence to plant false narratives online targeting Ukraine and other countries in Eastern Europe. In investment news, L Brands unloaded its Victoria's Secret company to Sycamore Partners. The business, Victoria's Secret, generated $7.4 billion in sales in 2019, but a lot of people are saying that the business is outdated. The shares of L Brands went up by 40% year to date so far. Tesla is starting to resume production at its Shanghai factory. Government officials helped the firm to restart after the coronavirus outbreak. There's a lot of other companies as well that are going to get started. They're going to start their productions as well. $26 billion merger between T-Mobile and Sprint is back on after a federal judge blocked the lawsuits from several AGs from the states, individual states that claim together that they didn't want that to go through. And there's also another thing as well that T-Mobile wants to renegotiate the deal with Sprint due to the fact that the revenue is down significantly in addition to their business. Other than that, BlackRock New Exchange Traded Fund, the iShares ESG MSCI EM leaders, say that 3 times fast. That ETF attracted over 600 million this week, despite that it was only open for the first time on Friday trading. It's the best debut in the U.S. for an ETF this year, as the firms care about environmental social governance. And although a small part of $4.5 trillion of the U.S. ETF market, sustainable funds add more than $8 billion in 2019, and the assets already top $20 billion. So it's definitely something that's growing. In international events, the violation of UN sanctions, North Korea enhanced its nuclear and ballistic missile programs this year, 2020. The UN sanctions were in place since 2006. They have illicitly imported refined petroleum in addition to $370 million worth of coal with the help of Chinese barges. So that's another situation that's going to escalate, probably. And remember, I told you guys last year that even though Trump was making a show about everything that was going to go on, I didn't expect it to continue. Total deaths in China surged past 1,500. There's another 15,000 new cases reported as in the most devastated province of Hubei Thursday. Hope I said that right. And about 67,000 people have now been infected, the vast majority of them in China. And some analysts believe that the numbers are going to go far higher. I think that I want to do a separate video of this, but I think what's going to happen is there's going to come out a piece of news that's going to be far worse than the information we have now. And it's probably going to peak in March or April in China, mostly due to the fact that it's in warmer weather. The flu and the virus is kind of exacerbate and get worse because of the cold weather. That's why the flu in the U.S., for example, we always have in the winter. And in unusual facts this week, U.S. Attorney General William Barr stated on Monday that he has charged 4 military hackers in the 2017 breach of the Equifax credit reporting agency security breach. It affected 147 million American citizens, one of the largest data breaches in U.S. history. Iran has claimed that it's ready to strike both Israel and the U.S. if it gives it any reason to do so. The head of the elite Revolutionary Guard said in a live speech on state television on Thursday. And in East Africa, they have a biblical level of locusts that are breeding so fast. They have hundreds of billions of these locusts, and they're breeding so fast that it could grow by 500 times in June. The UN is saying that they're going to need massive food assistance more than anything in Ethiopia, Somalia, Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda if efforts to control the infestation is not happening, because it hasn't been effective so far. And this is the last time it's been this bad. It was 70 years ago in Kenya. And hundreds of fires across Australia, the most populous state of New South Wales, have now been contained. It's the first time in 6 months, and they were helped out by heavy rains. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next week.